नवीस वीलॉगर फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान और सलाम बीसीआर। जी हाँ, ये है नया रेडियो चैनल जिस पे आप मेरी आवाज़ सुन रहे हैं।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं शहजाद पप्पू। आप सुन रहे हैं सलाम बीसीआर।
Salam VCR, medium wave 1566 and online. Your home of entertainment. Broadcasting across Greater Manchester and beyond. Check our website, project29.org.uk.
क्या आप अपने कारोबार को फलता फूलता देखना चाहते हैं? अगर आपका जवाब हाँ में है तो आज ही इस्लाम बीसीआर से राब्ता करें। फोन 0791262291।
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा। हम हैं सलाम बीसीआर।
Ji haan, indeed we are Salam BCR, and this is me, your host this afternoon, Anwar Haq. 3:29 is the time, well 3:30 exactly is the time now. I have my guest with me, and I'm going to find out whether he wants to speak in Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, Hindi. I don't know what language he wants to speak in. Assalamu alaikum Talat.
Walaikum salam. How are you? You're right.
Alhamdulillah, all good. First of all, really appreciate you coming on, and I know kids are on holiday and you've got a busy your hands
Tell
full
me about
basically.
it. Yeah. Well, they're keeping me busy, but do you know the best thing about kids is they keep you on your toes. That's the best thing of all. You know, you said, do you want to speak in Urdu, Hindi, Gujarati? Well, do you know, I wish I knew all the languages, but I think I'll stick to English.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, really appreciate it. How many kids do you have? Do you mind if you mind me asking?
I've got 3 kids. A girl, boy, girl.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Okay, the reason of this chat is, Talat, is what I want to, for our general public at large, basically, is to share with them people like yourself, people, performers, business people, politicians, just to give them an insight of their life, how they started, what's the road that they took. I mean, highs and lows. I'm sure there is in life, as you know. Without further ado, I want to go back. Were you born in UK or were you born in elsewhere?
No, I was born in the UK in a little village called Rochford in Essex.
I thought you were going to say Rochdale then.
And I'm an Essex lad, as they say.
Yes.
So I grew up in a town called Southend-on-Sea. So that's my hometown, Southend.
Okay.
And basically, schooling and education and my first sort of work in radio started in Essex.
Right.
Many years ago in the 90s when I first started work. And that's where I belong to. Even though I'm living in Manchester now.
Yes.
And I work for Radio Manchester and Radio Lancashire, Cumbria and Merseyside now, because they're all sort of shared programs, the ones that I produce. But yeah, I have southern connections, but I love up north.
Just to let you know, because when I was at drama school, I went for 2 years, London, but I didn't like London. I just couldn't. It was just, life is so busy, Talat. People walking with their heads down, either reading a book or in the phone or whatever on the YouTube, on the tube rather, underground. I couldn't understand that. So as soon as I finished, I was straight back up here.
No, you're absolutely right. It's just when I go down south now, and you mentioned the tube. So I went into the tube, went for work purposes and whatever, and I sat in the tube and I looked at people and I was going, hello, hello. And then suddenly one guy gave me this dirty look, looked at me strangely and put his head down back into whatever he was reading.
Yes.
And in that moment, I realized, what am I doing? I'm not up north. It's the tube, and southerners, like to keep themselves to themselves. And up north, if you're in a queue or at the bus stop or wherever, people have a conversation with you.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I completely forgot that for that split second when I just glanced up and acknowledged someone, and then realized, I thought, no, just keep your eyes down and get on with your journey. So yeah, there is a difference.
We'll go back. So you were born in the UK. Your parents came from?
My parents, we're sort of a mixed family in the sense that we're Asian, but my father's from Pakistan and my mother's from Kenya. And they came over in the 60s and they decided to move to Southend because lots of Kenyan Asians and their friends were living in Southend. That's where they moved to in the 60s.
Okay.
So when they came and landed in London, that's where they decided to go, Southend. And it was a very small Asian East African community. And we had sort of native Pakistanis and Indians there too. But there was quite a stark difference between the cultures because I think Kenyan Asians had exposure to wider cultures for a couple of generations. Therefore, things were at ease for them. Whereas those who came over direct from India, Pakistan, I think they had a different sort of mindset, and settling in perhaps took a bit longer for them. But yeah, that was the sort of the background of the town. But we sort of, having said that, it wasn't as idyllic because growing up we faced all sorts of racism. The National Front was also based there, and I think it's that being different is what led me to Asian programming in my career, because it was discovering what was great and unique about being Asian and being a Muslim that led me to discover stories and just was fascinated by the community. And I think one of the first books I came across that were written about Asian people and Asian stories was a book called East End at Your Feet, written by Farooq Dondi, the writer, and he was a Channel 4 commissioner back in the day. So I read that and I thought, oh my God, there are Asians out there that exist. And remember, and I say that because we were a very small community surrounded by the larger indigenous community. So things were very difficult sort of growing up. But yeah, that's how I sort of, that was my first experience of, I suppose, facing racism, but then also finding solace in what our community was and was about. So yeah, I always used to brag about that to my English mates, and they used to think he's always going on about Pakistan this and culture that, and they couldn't quite get it. But of course, in those days, it was alien, wasn't it? You daren't speak Urdu or Punjabi, which is my language of choice, Punjabi, and you would dare not speak that at school or anywhere in the streets, in case you were facing a beating or something.
Did you ever get? No, you said a beating. Did you ever get a beating? Because I remember getting a beating.
Do you know what? I was I wasn't very clever, but I had a sharp enough tongue that I could talk my way out of a situation.
Yeah.
And that's how I survived.
Yeah.
And lots of my other sort of Asian mates had beatings and had got into fights and were faced overt racism in their face. But yeah, we had that, but we also managed to avoid getting into real sticky situations because we had our wits about us, basically. And I think back in the day, you had to have your wits about you.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, people would just, completely walk over you.
Surely. So, growing up, middle school,
yeah, went to a normal comprehensive school. I mean, when people say, "Oh, you sound really posh," you do, and then I say, "Well, look, I'm not posh. I don't come from a posh background. Yeah, our families were okay. They did all right. Back in Pakistan, they had their own orange business, and in Kenya, my grandfather had his own business. But when our parents came over here, they lost all that. Absolutely. They were as working class as everyone else because they had to get jobs. They had their education to a certain level, but that didn't mean anything in the UK. So in that sense, we went to a normal school. We struggled like everyone else to get there. And the reason why I sound the way that I do is, and I'm sure, Anwar, you probably have heard of code switching, whereas you make yourself speak well. Our parents used to instill us, you've got to speak your English language properly. You've got to be clear, concise, just like the rest of them. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. So, at home, we'd have our sort of Punjabi, Pakistani culture, African culture. But then also, when we're out there, we would just be equally as English as anyone else.
Absolutely.
And that's, that code switching that we used to do. Those roles that we used to, create ourselves and go into, as you would know with your own experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So school then, did you go to university?
So then back in the day, I took some time out because I said I was fascinated with Pakistan and I wanted to know more about my family history. We didn't know a great deal. And so I went back to Pakistan, spent some time out there, lived out there for about a year or so. Managed to grasp the language, find my history, meet my extended families, which was a fantastic experience.
What year would
But I
that have
always
been?
had, oh, this was in the 80s.
Right.
And and then I always had a keen interest in Pakistan, and I had these weird ambitions that I wanted to get involved in politics over there and make a difference to the country, and who knows, become prime minister. We can now, can't you? Look at who we have. Um, and but then obviously reality hit when you think, no, Pakistan is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But because I used to have all these weird and wonderful speeches prepared. If ever I was a politician, if ever I wanted to develop this third world country, this is what I would be doing. And I thought, well, I need a platform, really. I need a platform for me to get any further. And then when I came back, I decided, I thought, actually, the media is probably the best route in. And I got in touch with my local radio station, Essex Radio, back then, and worked in the community action desk. And then slowly, over a period of a few years, became a features producer there, which was a little unusual for commercial radio. And that's how I got into radio. And then part-time, I studied journalism at London University Goldsmiths. So got the necessary qualifications that I needed, and the rest was in-house training. And on the basis of all the ideas I used to have about our Asian community, and because I had these ideas, I would see them on the TV. So on East, Network East, those programs produced by the BBC, Multicultural Unit back in the day, I used to be fascinated. And I thought sometimes those story ideas I would have, and I'd see those on the TV. Then I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. So then I took some time out of work and did some work experience at the Multicultural Unit at Pebble Mill back in the day. And I had a great story idea. I sold a story idea to the unit, and that's how I got into the BBC. So I worked in television for a while, and I worked on the East strand of, it was a documentary strand, news and current affairs. And so I worked on that. And then worked a bit on some of their entertainment programs like Network East and so on. So that's how I first got into the BBC and into radio, actually. Yeah, Essex FM. So a good few years experience.
Working in that kind of environment, I'm sure there weren't many ethnics around.
No, none at all. So people would say, why would you go into such a career? And back in the day, I did want to do medicine, not for the usual reasons of parents saying you've got to be a doctor. It was none of that. But I genuinely had an interest in sciences and in particular biology. So I thought that's what I'm going to aim to do. But I wasted a few years trying to get there. And back in our days, O-levels and A-levels and getting into college was a big deal. And we didn't have any sort of aspirational figures to look up to. So it was a real struggle. And clearly, I wasn't clever enough to get the grades in order to do medicine. And then somehow found myself into journalism. And I think the first sort of taste of television was when I did this business studies course, as most desis tend to end up doing at one stage in their life. And this new government course came out called CPVE.
Okay.
And I was a good student, and I did well. And I was selected nationally to partake in this mini documentary about this new course that the government are rolling out. And back in the day, the government, they had an office called the Central Office of Information. It's no longer now, but something else is in its place, clearly. And they then funded and produced this documentary following 3 students on this course, and I was one of them.
Okay.
So I had all these cameras visiting my home and filming and doing all the stuff, and I was like, this is amazing. And it was off that also was one of those little seeds in my head thinking, actually, that's a good way to get noticed. And if I have things to say, maybe that's the way forward. So all those little bits in your life, those fragments get together and, thrust you forward. And hence, why I had a fascination for television and documentaries. So I was there for a little while, worked on a few strands, and then I was a freelance journalist. So then it was a case of, right, well, what do I do next? When the gig was over, it was right, looking for work again. And one of the reasons I came up north was I finished at Pebble Mill, went back down south, and I got a call from my uncle who lives in Salford, and he said, oh, there's a new radio station that's just opened up here in Manchester called Asian Sound Radio.
All right.
And so I sort of chased them up, and they were looking for people in news and programming, and I had done that. And so I worked there for almost 2 years. Fabulous team of presenters. And then I decided, I thought, well, I need a change. I need to get back into more newsy stuff. And then I joined the BBC Asian Network and moved to Leicester for a little while and lived out there. And then in between, working in different sort of, areas, I did Radio Ramadan.
Okay.
So I'm sure lots of people are quite familiar with that in our region. And with a group of friends, we opened the first Radio Ramadan in Rochdale.
Okay.
And not the wonderful station we have now called Crescent.
Crescent Radio,
but,
yeah. So not that one, no.
Go on.
Not that
one.
one?
Say.
Sorry. So it wasn't Crescent Radio that you started off with?
No, no. I'd love to say have credit for starting up Crescent, but we didn't. But we were the first team to give Rochdale a taste of Radio Ramadan on Drake Street.
Okay.
Yeah, the road was Drake Street, and we rented a little house there, and we set up our radio station there. And when I was hearing your commercials, I was thinking, that's what we used to do. I used to write them, voice them, mix the music on cassette.
It is what it is.
So it was an interesting time, but a lovely time.
Yes.
And then after that, and it just so happened to be, and I think this is sometimes Allah's blessing, that every time my freelance work came to an end, it used to be Ramadan. So then my friends would say, well, why not let's do a Ramadan radio elsewhere? So then we moved to Blackburn. I had a friend in Blackburn and a lovely presenter called Zishan, who is sadly no longer. And we opened up a radio station in Blackburn with Zishan and another gentleman called Gulistan, Rana Gulistan.
I'm still in touch with Rana Gulistan.
Sorry?
I'm in touch with him. He's one of my WhatsApp friends.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So he's from Blackburn. Yeah. So you just need to mention me, and I'll give you the whole history, or the bad history, probably.
Because on that, he set up. He was working with a TV station. They set up a Sky TV station, Asian TV station there as well.
Yeah, so they had the Ummah channel in Blackburn, and he was heavily involved in that. But he got involved in that on the basis of when he got the experience working on Radio Ramadan. And we did that for a number of years, actually, in Blackburn, until, as you know, it becomes a business and it becomes quite competitive when other people, apply. We also opened one up. I assisted a friend to open one up in Oldham, called Mushel Radio back then. And then we also opened one up in Stoke, helped them set up there. And then in between that, I sort of went back into television, working for news, current affairs, English home regions, BBC Religion. So worked on a variety of documentaries in between. And then eventually a job came up for the Asian Programs Unit here in the Northwest for BBC Radio Manchester and Lancashire. And so I applied for that job and got the job, and that's sort of where I've remained.
But just to go back, Talat, when you were doing all those, as we would call it, a jobbing actor, one theatre here, a little film role there, whatever, you're going from job to job. Not always secure. They're limited contracts, basically. And as you said, in between, you were then doing these, luckily, Radio Ramadan would kind of come in. If nothing, I'm sure. Did you ever make any money out of that, or was it just kind of doing something?
No, because my family, we're involved in a small charity. It's our little charity called Hashim Welfare Hospital.
Okay.
So it's a small hospital that's built by my brother-in-law. He's a urologist, and he's from that region, and it was one of his passions to open up a hospital to serve the people there. And it's a free of charge hospital, very, very effective. And that was the reason why, that was my incentive to get involved in Radio Ramadan, just to raise funds for that. And it was in the early days, we managed with that money, get the building up and running. And it's a registered charity here in the UK and in Pakistan, and it's doing extremely well.
Excellent.
Albeit a very small setup. but actually very effective. And even now with the floods in Pakistan, we had a team of doctors and volunteers going out there helping people. So even though it's not geared for that, but it has enough people and experienced people to actually go out and help and facilitate, all that. And it's doing amazingly well. And that was the reason why I sort of got involved in Radio Ramadan.
Sure.
One of the reasons.
Yeah. But and also obviously keep you busy and see what's
and it was lovely because that was also my sort of first experience with different communities in the region across the northwest. And each region has their own different pockets of community. In Blackburn, we have the Muslim Gujarati community along with the Kashmiri, Punjabi communities as well. So it was a lovely experience, really. Yeah. So just to meet those people and to see how passionate they are about their faith, keeping it alive. And I was just always impressed by the young people coming in because we had an open house policy. And I know radio stations, as we work out the BBC, so I know it's very strict. But whenever we did Radio Ramadan, we made sure it was an open house policy. Anyone could come in any time of the day and walk into the studio. We just simply say hush and quiet when the mic's on, but come in, welcome. And kids used to come in hordes, and they used to recite their nasheeds, and it was just amazing. I was impressed by the young talent we had in Lancashire, and they were amazing. And people used to love it. They used to love coming in. It was a real community feel at the radio station.
You say that, and absolutely. When before we set up this setup here where we are in Bury, as we started doing Radio Ramadan, and in that time we used to have a lot of kids coming in, and I really found giving those kids the opportunity, just basically exploring things for themselves, with the invention of internet and so forth. Because our first broadcast was 2009. 2009. Yeah, 2009. When we did our first Radio Ramadan, we did 4 of those before we applied for the full-time radio license, 2012. And what I really found was that mainly it was young girls, from college who were going on to university, perhaps, and when they came back, the stories you heard from them, because often my main objective always has been is to encourage young kids into just explore, not with the desire to be into media, because it can be a very lonely, it can be very disheartening kind of a field as well. But at the same time, I think it develops you as an individual and develop your personal communication skills, self-esteem, self-confidence. Just talk, people. You can talk rubbish all day long. If you can talk, then that's half the battle. And some of these kids, when they came back, and they said, we actually got involved with debating societies. When I often see kids, our kids, they don't get involved in those, especially at university. They're going away from home. They want to have a bit of a chill out time. You know what I mean? So, other kids, they get involved, and they give their input about their culture, religion, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be that, but you engage with people and you're sharing experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You are. And I think and it's inspiring as well. And I think like the radio station, it was inspiring for a lot of young people. It gave them the confidence. We created some wonderful presenters who felt that this was something they wanted to pursue. And I think they pursued that on some of the commercial stations we have here in the region. And they did very well out of it. And it was just good. It was educational as well. It was, talking about their deen. And that was also a plus point. And even some of the mosques who perhaps didn't feel the media was their thing used to tune in as well. And I know music element is always a big debate within our Muslim community. So we had to sort of balance things out and have certain programs at a certain time of day. But generally, it included all the community and all the different schools of thought. And everyone was welcome. Every school of thought was welcome there. It was never a problem. And I think that was a beauty of why when we were operating Radio Ramadan, it did really, really well. And I think people certainly if you speak to Rana Gulistan, he will say that people still remember it till this day, even though stations have come and gone in between in Lancashire. But they remember those times because of the way we operated, and it was an open house policy, that we weren't overprotective and about the station and you can't come in here because blah blah blah. We really welcomed everyone.
No, absolutely. I think and that's the policy that we have. And in fact, because our station is primarily the output is aimed at the Asian community. So it can be in Urdu, it can be in English, it can be whatever language. And sometimes I find that the non-Asian individuals are put off by that, when in fact my objective, the agenda was that on this side of the microphone, you don't it doesn't, you don't have to be brown, you don't have to be Pakistani, you don't have to be Muslim, you don't have to be any of these. It's about working together. For me, it was about getting people from different cultures, different backgrounds, breaking down barriers, breaking down prejudices, of working together. It's like when people, for example, when we do a theatre play, you get to know people for a 2-3 month stint intimately.
Yes,
and you get to know people individually, and you don't make rational statements, of overall, that all people are like this. You don't.
So do you still find it a challenge now, though? Do you still find it difficult to get other communities involved?
Oh, I don't. I find it difficult to get any community involved.
Right.
Seriously. I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, I find, because obviously, and it's totally funded by me, this station here. I don't like the idea of going for funding, Talat. I like the idea of involving, local organizations who have projects to deliver, that we can deliver those projects for them and charge them for that service. Because I believe that, you need to be self-sustaining, although we are a registered charity. I don't like that thing of, going, when people apply for funding for this, funding for that. It just doesn't sit well with me for some reason. And the other difficulty really is that getting advertising in, from local businesses. I mean, alhamdulillah, we have a fantastic reach of Greater Manchester. A good 20-mile radius from Manchester. Everybody, even into Yorkshire, people catch us. So, and we're obviously online. But recruiting, that's the other thing that we find difficult. And I think, if you remember, I spoke to you and I said, if you have any people ever, we find it really difficult recruiting volunteers. And just to give an example, a young lady who I thought really had the possibility of being quite, not a presenter, because my objective is never to bring them in as radio presenters or anything like that. It's to give them an experience, it's to help them develop and find themselves. Yeah. And she was, this was just coming out of lockdown, and when she came in, I saw, she had potential. So, and she lives locally. And then next time she got in touch, she said, "Uncle, how much will I get paid and how many hours?" I really found that, because I remember, just in your seat in Radio Manchester, I did that for 2 years with Surinder Beyant. There was a guy called, I don't know if you ever remember him, Surinder Beyant.
Yes, we have. I have heard that name plenty of times.
Yeah.
I think, was it the first on GMR, Greater Manchester Radio, when they had the program, I think, Pataka, and then a program in another name I can't remember, but yes, there were.
Yeah. So I mean, we did that, and he had 4 or 5 people with him, doing different spots, and he was the main link man, basically.
Right.
Which was an experience. That's after I'd just come back from drama school. So that was, and I was willing to do anything, even theatre and television. I used to write to anybody and everybody. I'm not looking for money. I just want to gain experience of being in a local, into the environment of learning. Yeah. And one of the things that I found really fantastic was BBC Manchester. I don't know whether it still runs. There was a program called I and I Rule OK. It was a black a platform, similar as the Asian magazine program.
Right. Yeah.
And this was just African people.
So the program's changed in terms of its name. So it's called The People.
Right.
And it's presented by Mr. V,
right,
and Karen Gabay,
right,
and obviously we then have our Asian program. So that's a chunk, and my show is called Indus for the Asian community. When we say Asian community, it's wider for Indian, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, Pakistani, so on. So it's across the board. So that's our sort of chunk of community programs on BBC. And I think we have reduced in size over the years, but those programs are still going at the moment.
What I really found interesting with their setup was they had a core. I mean, I admired that. What I'm saying is they had a core set of presenters, a team basically, and then they had regular influx of young people coming in, wanting to gain experience, wanting to learn the trade. And I've gone on to see them working in television and working in mainstream, and I really kind of admired that, the opportunities given, which I think were limited from our side basically.
Well, that's exactly what we do as well. We do, the number of people that come through the Asian programs who have then gone on, because for them it's sort of a foot in the door.
Yes. And
they've gone on to get other jobs within the BBC, and some have done really exceptionally well.
Absolutely.
So it's about giving those opportunities.
So look, we need to take a break, and it's Asar Azan time, Mirabai. So what I'm going to do, we'll switch off. You can have a coffee break if you need to go to the bathroom, whatever. Sure. It'll be about 10 minutes. Sorry, it'll be about 10 minutes, and then we'll be back. It's 4 o'clock now. We'll come back at 10 past. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes, that's fine.
Brilliant.
No problem.
I'll see you then, mate. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Speak later. Ji Samain Aap Suren Salam BCR. Welcome back, and we're going to take a quick break now. And my guest we have here. Let's switch this off. There we are. Okay, we'll be back after the Asr Azan break.